while before somebody disproves that. Next thing you know, you forgot that in the beginning you made up the unicorns.
Mhm.
So if you go through a list of the things they made up in the new old biology, right? They made up, first of all, that they're cells. It used to be just tissue and protoplasm. Then they made up germs like viruses that they couldn't see. That's the unicorn story. They gave properties to bacteria that they didn't have, meaning they caused disease, even though they disproved it. So they would take just bacteria and expose it to people and they didn't get sick. So they disproved, but it doesn't matter because you got to keep the story going, right? It's all about free invention. They then said there's this DNA, and that's the hereditary material, and it's divided into genes, and the genes code for the proteins. And then they find out there's 200,000 proteins and 10,000 genes, so called. And so if you know arithmetic, it can't work.
Mhm.
so the whole thing, and then you have to figure out how to get the mRNA out of the nucleus because there's no hole for that. And then, anyways, then you make up ribosomes. And that's where the RNA is translated into protein. So they get the mRNA shots, and it goes to the ribosomes and makes spike proteins. Except every ribosome is a perfect circle on a picture, and that means they were spheres in real life. And if you realize that they homogenized the tissue in a blender and cut it at random angles, there's no way you could get an orange to be always perfect spheres. So they disprove there's ribosome, but it doesn't matter because and there's synapses in nerves, little gaps. Well, how'd you find them? Because you can't see them. So it's like the unicorn story. Well, I dehydrated the tissue like a nerve, and then it broke. So that's a synapse. Yeah, but that's just because you did something to the nerve and made it break. That's why you see a gap. And then you think they have this model, like how the nerves work, that you get this transmission and the calcium and the magnesium go in and out, and then the neurotransmitters swim across the gaps. And then you watch somebody play the piano and it's instantaneous. And you think, how did the neurotransmitter swim that fast between all your fingers and all the calcium go in and out? And you think, that's not right. And at the end of the day, then you have a medicine that's based on people making shit up. And I don't know about you, Alec, but I don't think that works.
No, clearly it doesn't work.
Because it's wrong. I mean, what can you say? It's wrong. Now,
This,
go ahead.
this is something that is frustrating to me. Well, there's a number of things about this that are frustrating to me as I come to learn this. One is, what language do we use to describe the various biological processes of the body? And I hate even calling them processes, or let's just say the things that happen that appear to occur, right? And then the second thing is, and this relates to another big topic I wanted to get into during this, is we already know allopathic medicine is based in everything that you just said. But unfortunately, even amongst the, health freedom crowds and the natural slash alternative approaches to health, holistic approaches to health, the overwhelming majority of those are also based in the same thing. So how do we begin to reframe what health is and how our body works without becoming nihilistic and just sort of throwing it all away and saying, we don't know shit, this is too complex, I give up?
Yeah, well, it's a good question too. But let me read another quote I happen to get from another physicist. The physicists are supposedly the smart guys, right?
Yeah.
Like they're the ones. So this guy's name is Herbert Dingle, not to be confused with Herbert Dingleberry. He wrote a book, A Century of Science. He says, quote, "The real world is not only unknown and unknowable, but inconceivable. That is to say, contradictory or absurd." So, in other words, basic scientific philosophy in the modern era tells us that, well, the reason these things don't make sense, right? Because, like, how can the nerve go that fast? It's obvious, Alec. The world is absurd.
Yeah, I don't buy that either.
It's
I don't buy that either.
inconceivable. You can't even think. You can't even trying to understand it makes no sense because it's absurd. Now, then you could ask, well, why bother to do science? Like, just throw up your hand and say, fuck, the whole thing doesn't make any
And I could
sense.
see where people would get to that though. I could
Yeah,
see,
it totally
yeah,
doesn't make any
yeah,
sense.
right, right.
So